Holy shit!
Uncle Tony, Lord of Aaran.
We are talking the Game of Thrones parody movie, Purge of Kingdoms, also known as Purge of Thrones. This one is directed by Aaran, and this actually stars Angus Macfadyen, fresh off his portrayal of Robert the Bruce in the Braveheart sequel. Here he is embarrassing himself. And we also have Lou Ferrigno as probably the other most recognisable named actor here, probably most known for the Incredible Hulk. So this really is purely a kind of a Game of Thrones parody with a few kind of like jokes thrown in for political reasons and kind of pop culture stuff. But the plot of this movie, it focuses on the King Baratheon character played by Angus Macfadyen. He wants to kind of gather all the kind of the main families to his castle to Purge Fest 3000, where he wants to try to promote peace among the 8 kingdoms, but obviously this being a Game of Thrones parody, everyone's kind of got ulterior motives for going there, and deception is the name of the game here. And then of course we have parody versions of the majority of the kind of the main characters from the Game of Thrones series.
The king is like a feather in the air. He goes whichever way the wind blows. And right now, Deadart is blowing him hard.
So let's talk about what works first of all, but before we kind of go into that, I want to say, personally speaking, I do not like parody movies, and comedy is very subjective to start with. There have been a few, I personally think, good parody movies. Not Another Teen Movie, you know, Scary Movie, even Superhero Movie to a degree I thought was okay, and obviously the original Airplane. So is this one of them, or is it one of the kind of the countless others that kind of fall by the wayside? Let's discuss. So first thing first, on a technical level, there were some pretty decent kind of photography here in certain sequences. They actually do a fairly good shots here of establishing scenery and kind of castle shots and things like this. So I thought there were some kind of technical aspects here that were fairly well done. Some pretty good photography, mainly kind of in establishing shots, but there's also quite lots of wide shots with kind of a fair few extras and stuff, so we do get somewhat of a sense of scale to a certain degree, so that was quite good. I actually thought some of the actors here do a pretty good impression of their Game of Thrones character counterparts. In particular, for me, I quite enjoyed the character who is like the Varys character, and also the Jaime Lannister character, both of whom I thought did pretty fun impressions of their Game of Thrones counterpart. Also Daenerys to a certain degree as well. And if we're honest, if you throw shit at the wall, some of it is going to stick. And there are a few jokes here that I did find quite funny here and there. They are in the minority, but there were a few, and I think the humour, generally speaking, is fairly broad here. But there are a few jokes that are made purely for Game of Thrones fans. Just to give you one that I found quite amusing, if you remember the original kind of Game of Thrones series where Tyrion meets those kind of like the mountain people, and there was like, you know, there was this like character called Shaggy who was the son of someone else, and here there's Shaggy, son of Scooby. Just a throwaway line, I thought it was quite funny, and there's a couple of things like that I felt were pretty fun. There's quite a fun joke involving a Stark which is often kind of mentioned in the same line as Game of Thrones, which has actually nothing to do with it. But yeah, so one or two jokes here actually did work for me. But like I said, there's so many jokes being thrown everywhere that, you know, it's inevitable that some of them are going to land. But let's talk about the negatives, because let's be honest here, the majority of these jokes don't land. Now, humour is subjective. This isn't going to be for everyone. But to me, this kind of type of humour is just so juvenile. And the humour is so broad, and it mainly focuses on dick jokes, poo jokes, fart jokes, knob jokes. It just is very, very kind of like base humour, like just going for the lowest common denominator nearly every time. And yeah, it just, unfortunately, at some points it even gets a little embarrassing. There's one scene here that is kind of a parody of a scene where Tyrion asks for a champion to kind of defend him in his trial by combat. And here he asks for a trial by twerking. And I just thought, oh, do you know what, watching it, it's cringy. Having the actors having to do that on the screen and someone thinking that was funny, it's just like, oh, it's just cringe-worthy sometimes. So, yeah, the majority of jokes here are just not funny. And like I said, it's all very kind of like someone who is really good in the show is really crap in this film, like Sirio 4L, for example. It's just very, very kind of obvious kind of jokes. There's also a few other jokes that are outside of kind of the Game of Thrones sort of stuff. We have, you know, jokes involving Kanye West, Kim Kardashian, Donald Trump, and that particular character is way too overplayed here. Yeah, I get it. Donald Trump is kind of a, you know, easy target in certain kind of like certain circumstances. But yeah, it's just a little bit overplayed here, and yeah, we get it. You know, it's just the joke is just goes on a little bit too long for multiple times, just because they've got someone who could do a Donald Trump impression, I feel. Obviously, the actual the jokes that were chosen as well. To me, it's somehow they ignore a lot of the kind of the main story elements from Game of Thrones and focus on some of the more minor elements, which I thought was an odd choice. But there you go. I mean, I guess it's only a kind of a short film. So, should you watch this movie? I mean, the story itself is nothing. It's just that they're kind of like flying with the seat of their pants and just kind of like making stuff up as they go along, if I'm honest. The majority of jokes do not work. I actually think the majority of character depictions do not work either. There are, like I said, there are a few exceptions and a few ones that I think are maybe, but the majority, like Tyrion, for example, I think his character is just crap in this, and it's not a funny version of what we had on the actual TV show, and that's true of a lot of characters here. And they just don't seem like an exaggerated version of what we've seen on the TV show. A lot of them just seem completely different, but they're just kind of names, like something similar. It just doesn't make sense to me. So I feel some of the kind of the comedy that could have been mined in a Game of Thrones parody have just been wasted. Now there's funnier Game of Thrones parodies that you can see as shorts on YouTube. You know, and they do a better job here of really kind of like, I think, parodying the actual series. Whilst here, it just takes the shortcut in having poo jokes, dick jokes, sex jokes. So it's just very kind of a base humour. If you like that sort of thing and you like Game of Thrones, then you may want to check it out. I will give it a 3 out of 10. Like I said, there are a couple of jokes that landed for me. And there are some, I think on a technical level, this film, you know, is relatively kind of well made. And a couple of good impressions. But it's really slim pickings, if I'm honest, talking about the positives. The vast majority of this film, I feel, will turn most people off. 3 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I shall look forward to you next time. Bye for now.